Welcome to the RokCoder tutorial. Today we're going to make a really impressive looking three-dimensional tunnel that we can actually travel through. And we're going to do this using nothing but the pen. So let's get started. Let's create a project. I'm going to call the project the tunnel for obvious reasons. Now I'm going to actually build this tunnel by drawing lots of circles, or more specifically rings, just the outlines of circles, from small ones in the distance to large ones when they're near us, to create the effect of a tunnel. So I'm going to need a function to draw a circle. So let's get that out of the way. That involves a little bit of maths. So let's make a block called draw ring at x. And we'll add an input for the x-coordinate or the center, and then we'll add a label, y colon, and we'll add an input for the y-coordinate and radius. And we'll add an input for the radius. So this custom block is going to draw the outline of a circle with the center at x, y, and the radius of radius. To do this, we're going to have a variable called angle for this sprite only. We're only going to use one sprite in this entire project, so every variable unless it's going to be for this sprite only. I'm going to make another variable called change in angle. And one more variable called num sides. So there are 360 degrees inside a circle, but I'm not going to draw, I'm going to draw the outside of the circle using lines. So how many lines am I going to use to make it round? If I use 4 lines, I'll have a square. If 6 lines, hexagon. As the number of lines go up, it gets more and more round. We'll demonstrate this. So num sides is going to be the number of lines I draw. So let's set num sides to 8, an octagon. Now to do that, we're going to have to do 8 sides, so that's going around 360 degrees in 8 steps. Means that the change in angle for each step will be 360 divided by 8, or 360 divided by num sides. And I'm going to start with an angle of 0. And now comes in the trigonometry, beautiful trigonometry. We won't touch on it too much in this project, but we do need a little bit to draw this circle. So we're going to go to, and it's going to be, now this is where it comes in, we're going to use sines and cosines to get this circle working. So it's going to be centered at x plus radius times, I'm going to use this mathematical function, we're going to change it to cos, which stands for cosine, or angle. And then I'm simply going to copy this block and put the same thing in the y, except I'll get rid of the x and I'll change it to y, and I'll change the cos, cosine, into sine, and that gets me a point on the circle. Now, as I said in the introduction, we're going to do this using the pen. So by clicking here, I can add the pen extension, which gives me lots of pen functionality. So now I'll set it to the beginning where I'm going to start drawing the shape. So I'm going to now put the pen down and actually draw it. So I'm going to repeat for however many sides I've got, which is num sides. And for each one, I'm going to change angle by change in angle, and then just copy this, go to, and just use the same one because angle is changed, so it's getting the next point on the shape, and then the next, and then the next. And at the end, we'll do pen up. And that will draw a circle, which we'll demonstrate shortly. But I'm going to get another mathematical function out of the way while we're here. make a block, distance between points. Point 1 with distance between 2 points. And we'll start with the x coordinate of the first point, and then we'll add a label y1 and add an input y1. Add a label x2, add an input x2, add a label y2, add an input y2. And what this block is going to do, it's going to, if I pass in 2 coordinates, x1, x, y1 and x2, y2, it will tell me how far apart they are. And this is using the Pythagoras theorem. So to do this, I'll have a variable to put the answer in. I'll call the answer distance. We simply set distance to the square root, which is another mathematical function. So again, we get this by dropping this down. Let's see, sqrt, the square root. And we need a plus in here. And 2 multipliers, a multiplier on that side of the plus, and a multiplier on that side of the plus. And inside, a minus there and a minus there. Yep, you might have to pause this to get this correct. But in this one we have x2 minus x1. I'm going to duplicate that and put that in that side. And over here we have y2 minus y1. I'm going to duplicate that and put that over there. And it's a fancy looking function, but all it does is it gives me the distance between 2 points on the screen, which we'll need later. So we've got a custom block to draw a ring and a custom block to find the distance between 2 points. When the green flag is pressed, let's test out the ring drawing. We'll erase all, we'll remove all pen from the screen. We will set a pen colour to 50, set the pen size reasonably thick, make it obvious, so we'll set it to 10. And we'll draw a ring. We'll do it at the centre of the screen, which is 0, 0, and we'll give it a radius of 100. I'll just remove these variables from being displayed. And we don't want to see the scratch cat, he's not really part of this project. So we will hide scratch cat straight away. Hit the green flag. Almost great, not quite. It's drawn, it started at the centre and then drew the rest of it. It'll do. Yeah, that's good enough. You can see it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sides. It looks fairly round. If I change the number of sides to 16, it looks even more circular. If I change to 100, then that looks pretty much like a perfect circle. Look how slow it draws. We're not going to be able to animate a tunnel if it's drawing that slowly. Simply right click on the custom block and hit run without screen refresh. Now I'm going to just click erase all, so we've got a clear screen, and now watch how quickly it draws instantly. So it makes a big difference in drawing speed with pen. I'm going to leave num sides as 16 because we're going to be drawing lots of circles, and each circle is going to have 16 lines. We don't want to have too many sides because if we start doing thousands of lines, then it's going to not run very quickly on slower machines. So anyway, we've got a function in here which will draw something close to a circle. So now that we've tested that out, we can get rid of that bit of code. And what we want to do for the tunnel is to draw a small circle in the distance and get larger and larger as it gets towards you. So let's set a variable called whole radius, and this is going to be to say how small it starts in the distance. And I'm going to make a block called initialize variables. Which I'll run at the beginning of the project. So I'll call it straight after the hide. And what this will do is I will set any variables that we're going to use in the game. So we'll set the hole radius to 0. We're going to start with a tiny hole. And how many rings are we going to draw? Well, that's a good question. Let's set a variable called numRings. And let's start, we'll draw 8. So we'll set numRings to 8. And how far apart are these rings going to be? Well, let's set another variable to distance between rings. In fact, I'm going to call that ring thickness. So how far apart are they going to be? Well, we can make this whatever value we want. I'm going to make it 20 to start with. So ring thickness to 20. So that pretty much tells me I'm going to be drawing 8 rings, starting with the first with a radius of 0, the next with a radius of 20, the next with a radius of 40. So another custom block, which I will call draw tunnel. And again, we're going to make this without screen refresh, because this has to be drawn very quickly. And in draw tunnel, the first thing we do is get rid of any pen that's on the screen, clear the screen, lift the pen up, and then we're going to set the radius to the radius of the starting of a whole radius, where we're going to start. So variables, make a variable, call it radius for this sprite only, and set radius, the whole radius. And then we are going to do this numRings times, so control, repeat numRings. So we're going to draw 8 of these. We're going to draw ring at 0, 0 with a radius of radius. And then we're going to change radius for the next ring. We're going to change it by ring thickness. You'll see why it's called ring thickness shortly. So now that will draw 8 rings on the screen, hopefully. Let's give it a go. Well, it would if I actually called the function. So we'll initialize variables and then draw the tunnel. Look at that, 8 rings. Very fast, very quickly drawn as well. So that's a great start. But that gives no impression. There's no way I can make that look like it's moving. What I need to do is draw each ring in a different color. So we'll add another variable, call it index. And we'll set index to 1 before we draw our first ring. And after each ring we've drawn, we'll change index by 1. So it's index is 1 for the first ring, 2 for the second, 3 for the third, and so on. And now I'm going to add another block called set pen. And in set pen, we're going to set the color of the pen that we're drawing with. So we go to our pen block, set pen color, and we're going to set it to not minus index. We're going to set it to minus index. So that's an operator. And don't forget to call that function. So we'll set the pen before we draw each ring, run that, and they look to be all red. But that's only because each colour is very similar. There's only one colour index between each one. So to emphasise this a little bit more, I'm going to add another variable called difference in color. And I'm going to set that variable up in initialize variables. I'm going to set it to, say, 8. Okay. And here, instead of 0 minus index, I'm going to multiply this by 8. So then we'll have 8 between each color, so it'll be more obvious. So multiply that by, and I won't use a number, I will use the difference in color, because doing this makes your code easy to read. If there was just an 8 there, I wouldn't know what it was doing, but difference in color tells me, and it also makes it very easy to change the values. So if I look at that, and now you can see, now there's more difference between each one, you can see they're all different colors. So how can I make that appear to be moving? Well, if we draw it like this, and then on the next frame we draw it with all the colors moved out one, so this is no longer a green color, this is aqua, and this is blue, and this is dark blue, and this is purple, and all the colors will seem to be coming out towards you, almost making it feel as if you're going into the tunnel. So we're going to add another variable. I'm going to call it tunnel index. Just keep a track of how far you've traveled it into the tunnel. Before we draw the tunnel, we'll set tunnel index to 0. And then we're going to, in this project, we're just going to draw the tunnel over and over again. So we'll draw the tunnel, and then we will change the tunnel index by 1. Now over here, we're going to use a tunnel index. So instead of 0 minus index, we're going to use tunnel index. So on the first frame, we'll start with that being 0, and then it'll be 1 on the next frame, 2 on the next frame, and that should give the impression that these colors are moving. There we go. Moving quite quickly, actually. And that's looking a bit better. We can draw more lines. So change the number of rings from 8 to, let's say, 12, and then run it again. See, and now it's drawn it even bigger, and it's as if you're moving into the tunnel, but it would be better without the white lines between each ring. Now we know how far apart each line is. It is ring thickness, so why not set the pen to that ring thickness, the pen size, and then it should fill the whole gap. So we'll go to pen, we'll set pen size, and we'll set to the variable we set as ring thickness. And now let's have a look. Now that looks almost hypnotic. We're actually traveling into that tunnel now. But it'd be quite nice to be able to make the tunnel darker in the distance and to be able to control how dark it is in the distance. And we can do that with pen brightness. We're going to set a variable called brightness, which will tell us how bright we want the very furthest point to be. And we will set that in initialize variables. So set, and for now, I'm going to set it to 0, which is black. So it's going to be very dark in the distance. And brightness can go all the way up to 100. Anything above 100 will just still be full brightness. So I could set it to 150, it would still be full brightness, the same as 100. And I want the very furthest to be dark and get brighter and brighter as it goes towards us. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new custom block called set constants. Not a new variable, a new custom block. And this in here, I'm going to set values that are calculated. So I know the very furthest point there is going to be a brightness of 0, and I want the very nearest point to be up to 150. So all these outside ones are going to be at full brightness, and then it's going to drop away down to 0. So each ring is going to get slightly brighter, and how brighter it's going to get is I'm going to put in a variable called change in brightness. So another new variable called change in brightness. for this sprite only. And we're going to calculate what this should be. So we're going to set change in brightness. We're going to set it to the darkest colour it can be will be brightness. We're going to add from there, so brightness plus and now actually that's not quite right. We're going to set it to the maximum brightness it can be, 150, minus the darkest it can be, which is brightness, and divide that by the number of rings we have. So we have that little equation in set constants. And let's not forget to actually call the set constants function, which we'll do after we initialize the variables. And in the set pen block, we've already set in the color, we're setting the size, so let's set the brightness in there. It's still the same block, set pen color block, but you can drop this arrow down and choose brightness, and we're going to set brightness to the darkest it can be, which is the brightness variable. And index increases by 1 for each ring that you move out. So if we add in here change in brightness times index, each ring going outwards will be a little brighter. Hopefully. Let's test. So if I stop that, you can see the colours are a lot darker in the middle, getting brighter and brighter as they move out. So that works great. And now I want to make it so that it's more interactive. I want to make it so I can move the arrow around the screen and it controls where the tunnel's ending. That's actually quite easy to do. Instead of drawing a ring at the centre of the screen, we could just draw it at mouse X, mouse Y. If I run that code, the whole tunnel follows me around, but that's not really what I want. I want to be setting the furthest point of the tunnel and then that come towards me. I don't want to just be moving it around like this. I'll show you what I mean. We're going to need to store the center points for every ring that we're drawing, so we're going to need to use lists. I'm going to make 2 lists. I'm going to make a list called center X. As I said, everything is for this sprite only because I'm only using one sprite. And we're going to make another variable called center Y for this sprite only. And I've already got an initialize variables block. Let's have an initialize lists block. In fact, no, let's initialize a list in here. Why not? So I'll just make a little bit more space for myself. Initialize variables. What I want to do is delete all of center X, make sure there's nothing there, delete all of center Y, and then I want to create enough entries in this list to cope with however many rings I decide to display. So I'm going to make 200, that's going to be more than enough. So I'm going to repeat 200 times. Just adding 0 to center X and adding 0 to center Y. And I'll put this in a new custom block. I'll call it initialize list. So make a block, initialize lists. It's got a loop in there, so I'm going to run it without screen refresh to make sure it runs fast. And over here, where I've initialized variables, I will also initialize lists. And I'm going to make a custom block called update list, which I will explain why in a second. So we'll update list. We'll do it without screen refresh, so it happens really quickly because there are going to be loops in this. And what I want to do is that furthest ring I want to set to the position of my cursor. So that will simply be replace the first item of center X with mouse X, and the first item of center Y with mouse Y. So that will control the furthest ring. But what happened to the center that was there before? I'm going to move that into item 2. I'm going to move what was in item 2 into item 3, and what was in 3 into 4. But I'm going to have to do this backwards, because otherwise, consider if I move item 1 into item 2, then item 2 is now item 1. So if I move that to 3, then I'm just copying item 1 throughout. I'm going to have to go backwards. So I'm going to use the index variable again. I'm going to set index to num rings, the last ring that we're using. And then I'm going to repeat backwards. So repeat, and it's num rings minus 1, because I'm also initializing the last one with this value. So num rings minus 1, and just copying elements of the list to the next element. So replacing item index of center X with the previous one, which will be item index minus 1, of center X. And then I'll just copy that by right-clicking and duplicating, and I'll do the same with center Y. And then, of course, I'll have to change the index value. And because I'm working backwards, I'm going to change index by minus 1, and then set the furthest one to the mouse pointer. So if I do that when I draw every frame, we should get a very interesting effect. So let's go to draw tunnel. After I've drawn the tunnel, I'm going to update list so that the next tunnel I draw will be slightly different. I'm not going to draw it at mouse X, mouse Y. This is where the lists come in. I'm storing the positions for every ring. So draw a ring at item index of center X and item index of center Y. And hopefully we'll see what happens when I hit the green flag. The furthest one isn't moving at all, but you can see what's happening with the rest. It's not just moving the tunnel around like it did before, it's actually moving the furthest point, which is then moving towards the front, which gives a much nicer effect. Though we should have a quick look why the furthest dot isn't moving at all, and I can see that straight away. I've started with index 0, and I should start with index 1, which is the first entry in the list. So now there we go, now it's all moving around properly. But as I move, I'm creating white lines between them because the circles are far further apart, so they're not being drawn thick enough to fill those white lines. So I need to calculate how far each point is from the next point and add that to the thickness. And that's where the block I added at the beginning, distance between points, comes into its own. I'm going to call that function here before I set the pen. And what's going to go into here, the distance of point x1 is going to be, I'll just copy it from here. And y1 likewise will be here. And then I'm going to look at the distance to the next point, to the next item in the list, which will be item of center X, item of center Y, but it won't be index this time, it will be index plus 1, because I'm seeing how far away it is from the next circle. So simple as that. And I've already written that custom block, so that will tell me how far it has moved. And now I'm going to need to draw with a different radius now. Because, as I say, as it's moved further away, the middle point of this circle is going to be slightly different. So I'm going to draw it at radius plus the value of the return from distance between points, which is distance, divided by 2. Now we're almost there. The other thing I've got to do is make the pen actually draw in a thicker line. So to do that, it's going to be the ring thickness, and simply just add distance to that, how far the points have moved apart. So set the pen size to ring thickness plus distance. And let's see how well that works. Now that's giving a very interesting effect around the edge. And the reason for that is covered in another tutorial I wrote about moving sprites smoothly off the screen, and how when you get towards the edge of the screen, you can no longer move them smoothly without using the technique that I've suggested, which is to scale the sprite up. You might want to watch that tutorial. I think it's called Moving Sprites Smoothly Off the Screen. It's in the Hints and Tips playlist in the RokCoder tutorials. So all I'm going to do is simply set the size. After the hide, I will set the size to a ridiculously big size, 2000, 2000%. And there we can move all over now. Now, what else can we do to make this even better? Well, we can make it so we can change the speed the tunnel's travelling at. At the moment, I'm just saying change tunnel index by 1. But if I change that into a variable, called the variable speed, and initialize that in initialize variables, so speed of 1 is travelling really quite quickly. How about changing to 0.2? So it's a fifth, it should go a fifth of the speed. So if I run it now, there, that's moving a lot slower. And that is creating a nice effect now. The only thing I'm not too keen on is the rings don't move smoothly outwards. They move in steps of ring thickness, so that they're not coming smoothly out, they're just basically swapping positions. Can we make it actually the rings move smoothly out? And we can do this using a little bit of mathematics. Instead of starting the tunnel at radius, so it always starts at 0, whatever I set the whole radius to, I'm going to make it move smoothly between the rings. So I'm going to add whole radius plus, I'm going to use a modulus function. That's going to be tunnel index, which is the value that increases by 1 every time I draw a tunnel, mod ring thickness, so the value will change between 0 and ring thickness -1. And if I look at that, ignoring the colours, you can see in the middle that it's moving very slowly and smoothly outwards. So now let's get the pen so that the colours are also working correctly. To get the brightness to gradually change between the rings, I'm going to have to change this function slightly so that I've got index plus and I'll put a divide in there, and I will put a modulus in the first half of that divide. The modulus is going to be tunnel index and ring thickness, and the divide is going to be ring thickness. And that will make the brightness change gradually as it moves. And now for colour, I'm also going to add a few new variables for colour. I'm going to add colour base, so that instead of always starting at colour 0, we can control what colour it starts at. And I'm going to add colour count, so we can restrict the number of colours it uses. So we can, if we want, just make it use 2 colours and have a zebra type effect, or we can make it use 5 colours, or as many as we want, but we can do it all just by changing the variables. So this function is going to become color base plus, so we'll start at the color base, and it's going to be color base plus. Now we're going to use a little bit of maths here. We're going to have a divide, and we're going to use a floor function which rounds any fractions away from a number. So we always end up with a whole number. Floor of tunnel index divided by ring thickness. And then we're going to subtract index from that. So instead of using tunnel index, we're going to put that in there. So we have the floor of tunnel index divided by ring thickness minus index. And then one more thing in there, we'll add the modulus so that we can control the number of colours it uses. So that mod and the modulus will be the colour count. And then we'll add that onto color base, and we'll set those variables up in initialized variables. So we're already setting difference in color, and now we're going to set color base and color count. So let's allow it to use 8 colors, and we'll start at 0. We run that. There we go. Now we have a tunnel that's really smoothly moving outwards, mostly. Suddenly jumps at that point. Let's investigate why. I've simply got the order here wrong. It should be floor of tunnel index divided by ring thickness, like that. So you have to keep your eyes on the order you add things to the mathematical equations. If I run that now they're all moving very smoothly outwards. Very slowly, but I can easily increase the speed because that's set as a variable. I can set the speed to 2. We can see them all moving nicely outwards. But it'd be good if it filled the whole screen. For instance, when I take it right down to the corner, I have a massive outside ring, but it's not filling the screen. So how many rings will I need to fill the screen? Again, I can work this out with maths. So let's go down to our set constants. I can calculate the distance from one corner of the screen to the diagonal other one using my distance between 2 points function. So if I put point 1 as the top left corner, and I put point 2 as the bottom right corner, that will tell me how far apart they are. And using that, if I divide that by the width of the rings, the ring thickness, it tells me how many rings to fill the entire screen. But I don't quite need to fill it all because I've got a variable called hole radius, and I can ignore that. So what I need is to set num rings to distance, which I've just calculated, minus hole radius, because there's no point in drawing rings where there's a hole, and divide that whole thing by ring thickness. Like that. And now I'll take num rings out of initialized variables because I'm not initializing it there anymore. I'm not setting it myself at all. It's being set automatically to make sure the screen is filled. So if we have a look at this, it's now filling the screen with the rings. If I look at the variable, I can see it's using 30 rings to fill that screen. So it's automatically calculated that for me. Now I don't much like seeing that dotted, that little bit of white showing in the distance either. So to fix that, I'll just go to the backdrop, have a look at the costume, convert it to a bitmap, and flood fill it with black, so the background is black. Let's go back to the code of the sprite, which I'll rename as tunnel. And now the final piece of the puzzle and the pièce de résistance is to make this so we can tweak all the values as you're flying down the tunnel. So to do that, first of all, we'll make the values visible. So let's create a block called show variables. And in this, we're simply going to show the variables we want to be able to tweak. And there are 8 of them. So that's 8 variables that we want to be able to tweak. Let's take it over here where I've got a bit of space. Angle isn't actually one of them, so let's get that back off the screen. The variables are speed, ring thickness, num sides, hole radius, brightness, and all of my color settings, which are color base, color count, and difference in color. And I'm also going to make another block called hide variables, which I'll do right now. Same thing, but it will hide them all. So I need 8 copies of hide variable. 2, 4, 8. Same variable, so I'll just copy the ones I've just put in the show block. And num sides, hole radius, brightness, and then all of the colors. Fiddly brightness, and then all of the colors. Color base, color count, and difference in color. And if I just tap the show variables, they all appear in a big lump, so let's space them out a little bit. Let's have num size down there, and we'll turn it into a slider, and we'll set the range. Num sides, we'll have it from a square with 4 sides up to a fairly round shape with 32 sides. And color base, I'll move over here, I'll change that into a slider. I'll set the range of the slider between 0 and 100, default values, that's fine. Color count, I'll make that into a slider, and I'll allow again between 1 and 100 colors. No point in having 0 colors, otherwise I'm not showing anything. Tunnel speed, great. Slider, I'll have it between, and this may surprise you, but -10 and 10. Tunnel brightness, let's put that over there as a slider. Brightness, I'll allow it to go up to 50, I think. I'm just choosing numbers here. You can play around with these if you want. Well, you can play around with them actually when you're running. Difference in color, I think 0 to 10 will do. So change the slider range 0 to 10. And ring thickness, I'll have that as a slider, and I'll let that go up to 40. What should I let it go down to though? I don't want it too thin or it won't draw. Just 10, I think. So let it to be 10, because it would take, if you had a ring thickness of 1, it would take so many rings to draw, it would be too slow. So ring thickness is set. Hole radius, I'll take down to the bottom, and I'll allow it to go between 0 and 100, which are the default values, so I don't need to change that. So now I've got a screen pretty much full of sliders, which will allow me to tweak everything actually as I'm playing. But I'm going to want to be able to hide those as well, because they're going to get in the way of actually the joy of looking at the tunnel. So one very last function, I'm going to call it control mouse. And what I'm going to do is, if you click anywhere on the screen, it will hide all the sliders. If you click again, they'll appear. So make a block called control mouse. But I have to be careful, because if I hold the mouse down, I don't want them to rapidly appear and disappear. So let's make a variable called mouse down ? Because it's going to be a true or false variable. And let's make another variable called showing ? So I know whether the variables are being displayed or not. We don't want those on the screen. So in control mouse, if the mouse is down, so a sensing block, mouse down, then I do a bunch of stuff. But if it isn't down, I can set my variable mouse down to false. So if the mouse is down, if it wasn't previously down, so that's another if statement. If mouse down, my variable is false, then I can set mouse down to true because it is now down. And if it was showing, I want to hide the variables and vice versa. So if showing is true, then I want to hide all the variables. And if it was false, I want to show all the variables. And I want to update the value of the showing variable. So if I'm hidden all the variables, showing is now false. And vice versa, if I'm showing them, it's now true. So that should allow me to tap on the screen and hide, or not hide them, if I remember to call the the function. So in my main loop over here, I will need to control the mouse in here, and I also need to move this set constants, because I can change the values now while the rings are running, and so it will need to recalculate these. So I'll set constants there, and now hopefully if I tap on the screen, I can make those appear and disappear. And one very last step, and this just to make it feel really good, when the green flag is pressed forever, and I'm going to go to sounds, I'm going to upload a sound, and it's going to be a recognizable one. Go back to my code, and not forever play Doctor Who until done. Now let's go to the full screen and let's run this project. Oh, one more thing that I nearly forgot when I first start the program, initialize variables. I'm going to need to set showing. Should I start with the variables hidden or showing? I'll start with them hidden. No, I'll start with them showing. So I'll set the variable to showing, and I will show variables. And I believe we are now done. Let's go to full screen, run the project. Here we go. I tap the screen, it vanishes, and I can see exactly what I'm doing. Tap the screen again, the back. Let's make the tunnel go a little bit faster. make the rings thinner. Let's make it into squares. Why hasn't that changed? I've changed the number of sides, but it hasn't updated. So this is bug checking the program now. So when num size change, why has it not updated? Let's have a look. Num sides is 16. Was I actually changing the correct variable there? Yep, num sides down to 4. Hasn't made any difference whatsoever. Num size is 16. Somewhere in here I'm resetting num size. There. I'm setting num size in drawing. That has to go because it's being calculated, well, it's being set by a slider variable now. So now, subject to there being no more failures, change num size down to 4. I'm travelling down a diamond or a square tunnel. I can increase it right up to almost a perfect circle. Change the ring thickness, go faster, or I can go backwards. I can fly out of the tunnel. Well, that's a weird effect. That's a really nice effect, actually. I like that. If I reduce the number of colours, and the difference in colour, I can just have shades of red almost. Look at this. Or if I don't want red, pick whatever colour I want. At the end of the tunnel, I can make a hole appear. And if I change the brightness, you can really see that hole there. I actually prefer it with no hole whatsoever and to go to a really dark tunnel. Let's bring the difference in colour up, let's bring the colour count up, let's bring the speed up, and let's fly around our tunnel. So hopefully you've enjoyed making this project and are enjoying the results yourself right now. Maybe add other things to make this a more impressive demo. What could you add to it? You could have things flying out of the tunnel, that'd be quite nice. Or you could have it so that it started totally still and just got faster and faster and faster on its own. You can play around with it, do what you want with it. Have fun with it. So, if you've enjoyed this tutorial, then please don't forget to subscribe to the RokCoder YouTube channel, and I'll see you again next time.